Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. My name is David Nates, and this is the final video in a 4-part retrospective which covers Van Damme's best projects from the 1980s until current times, separated by decade. In this video I will focus on JCVD's projects from the past decade. The 2000s wasn't the best of time movie budget wise for Van Damme, but the past 10 years haven't been too bad for the action hero. What we must understand as spectators is that having a career that spans from the 80s to nowadays is not an easy feat. There are so many actors that make 1 or 2 good movie projects and simply disappear. Van Damme definitely had his prime in the late 80s and 90s, and with the low budget cinema industry changing with the advent of DVD, flat screen TV, and digital filmmaking, B-movies were simply becoming of less good quality. Van Damme did manage to always keep on working even though he wasn't in big cinema releases. He did manage to at least be in 1 or 2 movies per year, and he for the most part kept in shape compared to other action stars like Steven Seagal that literally became obese and where each movie performance is worse than the other. In 2011, Van Damme was also part of an 8-part miniseries produced by ITV4 in the UK, where they follow JCVD and his family for 5 months and have an opportunity to delve inside his personal life. The series is entitled Behind Closed Doors and is such a great piece of work. It truly shows the ups and downs of the star, as well as his self-doubts, but also his family life and willingness to travel the world and try new things. Also be a good sport. I don't know if many movie stars would be willing to go as in depth as he did in that documentary, but Van Damme surely did, and for a JCVD fan, this is probably the best thing that came out of him since JCVD, and before that his bigger widespread cinema releases. And if you're wondering where you can watch it, well, it's actually available to stream on YouTube for free. This past decade also has some other notable mentions, such as his voice-over role as the character of Master Croc in the computer animation film Kung Fu Panda 2 and 3. This is one of those hyper big budget animated CGI movies with A-list actors such as Jack Black, Angelina Jolie, Dustin Hoffman, just to name a few. I can't go on talking about the past decade without highlighting Van Damme's epic splits for the 2013 75-second long commercial for Volvo trucks. This commercial has Van Damme performing his epic splits between 2 trucks, and it reached 40 million views on YouTube after 9 days. The commercial took 2 days of preparation and was shot in 1 take on the 3rd day, with 2 truck drivers driving backwards at a constant speed of 25 miles an hour and Van Damme being held in between by a hidden safety harness. With all of this being said, I'd like to speak about the 2012 movie Expendables 2, which was directed by Simon West and features an ensemble cast of the most memorable action actors from the past couple of decades, such as Silverster Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Dolph Lundgren, and many more action stars, but the list is too long to mention everyone. I do want to highlight a small cameo from iconic action star Chuck Norris, who very rarely acts in movies anymore. As for Van Damme, he plays the lead antagonist named Vilain, which has actually many meanings in French, such as ugly, bad, horrible, displeasing, but obviously refers to JCVD's character being the lead bad guy of Expendables 2. This movie actually marks the comeback of Jean-Claude Van Damme to the big screen, albeit he is part of an ensemble cast and being a villain, which is very different than his usual hero self. Actually, Van Damme was already supposed to be in the original Expendables, which was filmed back in 2010, but scheduling issues and a reluctant Van Damme resulted in the original part that was offered to him being given to Dolph Lundgren. In some ways, maybe being in the sequel simply worked out, as he got to explore a type of character for which he rarely is cast as. Also, this movie features Scott Adkins as Vilain's right-hand man, which was really nice to have him paired up with all these veteran action stars. Expendables 2 tells the story of Barney Ross, played by Silverster Stallone, who is the leader of a bunch of mercenaries. After returning from a mission, one of Ross's team members, Billy, played by Liam Hemsworth, tells him that he plans to retire at the end of the month. Later, Ross is forced to accept the mission given to him by CIA operative Mr. Church, played by Bruce Willis, to retrieve an item in Albania. Once there, the group gets ambushed by Vilain, played by our good old pal Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he captures Billy, demanding the item in exchange for Billy's life. Once Van Damme gets the item, he goes against his word and kills Billy. After the horror that they had to endure, the Expendables team go on the hunt for Vilain, as the item that he stole from them is a computer with the location of 5 tons of refined plutonium. This leads to many action sequences throughout the movie, which end in a final fight between Van Damme and Stallone, which highlight a bunch of Van Damme's iconic moves, including the jumping 360 split kick that made him famous. This movie is by no means a very intellectual film, but the fact that they had so many action stars packed in this action fest of a movie makes it a must-watch not only for Van Damme fans, but also fans of action movies in general. The second movie that I'd like to speak about is the 2013 movie called Welcome to the Jungle, which premiered at the Newport Beach Film Festival and was released as a straight-to-DVD in early 2014. By no means is this movie the best Van Damme film, but at the same time, even though poorly reviewed, Van Damme's portrayal of Storm, an ex-Marine guy that is an over-the-top cartoonish caricature of a delusional nature, lover, martial artist, master in charge of a group of likewise idiots. Granted, Van Damme's part in the movie isn't the biggest. Even though he does have a presence throughout the movie, he does do an amazing job at portraying an over-the-top wilderness genius or crazy guy, depending on how you look at it. Many of the jokes are based on various stereotypes from martial art movies, and even some screams that are very reminiscent to the same kind of screaming seen in much older movies such as Bloodsport. The movie tells the story of an office team that is sent on a mandatory team building seminar on a wilderness island led by an ex-Marine named Storm. However, things go sideways very fast after finding the pilot of their plane dead, and pretty early on in the movie, Van Damme gets mauled by a tiger. After this accident, these office workers are left to their own survival skills, which led them to many awkward situations, including hallucinations and a war between the co-workers who have split into 2 groups. Later on in the movie, Storm is revealed to still be alive, and he creates more over-the-top situations for the office team. Again, this is not the best movie in the world, but definitely worth a watch just to see Van Damme performing some comedy and some of his trademark moves. Plus, the film being an independent feature seems to have had a bit more care given to the actual cinematography and makes it look like a bigger budget movie than it actually is. The third movie that I'd like to speak about is the 2016 movie Kickboxer Vengeance, which is a semi-reboot to the original 1989 Kickboxer movie starring Van Damme. In the original film, Van Damme's character is Kurt Sloan, but for this one, Alain Moussi takes on the iconic role of Kurt. Van Damme's character name in this Kickboxer movie is called Master Durand. In the actual real sequels of the movie, which were done in the early 90s, they have Kurt and his brother Eric getting killed as a silhouette in the far background of a shot at the beginning of the original sequel. So the last surviving brother, David Sloan, played by Sasha Mitchell, goes on to defeat Tong Po. The original sequel had a really bad plot, and they probably came up with this silly story either because Van Damme didn't want to do the sequel, or they couldn't afford him anymore since he was rising as a star. Either way, for this soft reboot, Van Damme comes back as a trainer and does a good job at it. This movie being a reboot tells a similar story to the original one. Eric Sloan fights Tong Po in an underground tournament and gets killed by Tong Po. Kurt Sloan decides to go to Thailand to avenge his brother's death. There he meets Master Durand and starts training under his belt, which leads to a final fight against Tong Po. There are many little subplots with the movie, but the general idea of the film is pretty straightforward. Alain Moussi does a decent job at portraying Kurt Sloan. He has a fit body and does some nice kicks, even though his more acrobatic moves leave a little to be desired. Even with that, I did appreciate his martial arts, but unfortunately he is lacking what made the original movie a success, and that is Van Damme's charisma. Alain feels so stiff in his acting that sometimes it just became cringeworthy. JCVD has had quite a few fun little segments spread out throughout this film. It's always nice to see him doing what made him famous. A cool little Easter egg is having the actor Michel Kissy as a small cameo in a prison cell. He was the original actor playing Tong Po in the 1989 Kickboxer. Again, this is definitely not a mainstream movie, will mostly only actually please hardcore fans. It's still worth a watch, even though people that don't have a soft spot for the original movie may not like it. It was a good effort from its producers, and it did lead to another sequel which was not very good. The fourth movie that I'd like to speak about is Jean-Claude Van Damme. And yes, technically it is not a movie but a show released by Amazon. I do have to place it in my top 5 as it's literally the best thing that he has done this decade. The cinematography is pleasing and the story in itself is so fun and really is reminiscent of late 80s, 90s action flicks. The series tells the story of an aging action star, Jean-Claude Van Damme, who pretty much retired from acting. Now middle-aged and bored, he finds himself lost within the confines of his spotless Hollywood mansion. The idea of the show is that while he was filming all his most iconic action films, he was also a double agent operating under the alias Johnson. Now retired and feeling much older, he decides to get back in the acting spy game after a chance encounter with his old lover, Kate. This leads him to acting in a Bulgarian film, which is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn mixed into an action movie. This leads to many comedic moments that slowly transition into more serious and dramatic parts. The show is only 6 episodes long and then was cancelled by Amazon, unfortunately. Even though it's short, it does tell a full story and tells a comedic story with many intricate plots and genuinely fun acting sequences. One thing that I really appreciate about the whole series is the fact that JCVD gladly makes fun of himself and many previous roles. There's time travel and even multiple versions of Van Damme interacting with each other. This kind of goes back to the fact that JC has often played twins or even clones of himself. Also, myself being a super fan of the Back to the Future trilogy, having slightly had elements of time travel mixed into the whole lot was literally the cherry on top of the cake for me. I have a hard time understanding why the show was cancelled, as it was an extremely fun show, but ratings must not have been high enough for Amazon to produce a second season. Definitely a must-watch for fans, but will also be super enjoyable for most people who simply love comedy with a hint of action and a fun story. The fifth movie that I'd like to speak about is a 2018 movie called The Bouncer, which is actually a Belgian-French production. Once again, in the same vein as the movie JCVD, European films featuring Van Damme seem to often produce much better results than any of JCVD's American straight-to-DVD releases. This movie actually had a proper cinema release in French, speaking European countries, and even garnered enough interest for a limited cinema release in the USA. The Bouncer tells the story of Lucas, a sort of anti-hero who is struggling through life working in nightclubs as a bouncer in order to provide enough income to raise his 8-year-old daughter. After an accident following a fight in one of the nightclubs where he works at, where he injured the son of a member of the European Parliament, he is faced with possible jail time and losing his daughter to social services. In order to avoid that, the police asks Lucas to spy on a criminal organization for whom he is working. If he gives them enough information, the police promise to erase whatever problems he has had with the justice system. The Bouncer is a very dark and somber film. Van Damme's portrayal of the character is very reminiscent to most of his characters in most of his early 2000 movies. That was a time in Van Damme's career where he was overcoming drug addiction and being diagnosed as bipolar. He was having many ups and downs where when he was happy it was over the top, but when he became sad everything felt completely dark. Even though the movie has a dark atmosphere, it blends perfectly with the character and tells a pretty unique story. I'm not going to say that The Bouncer is his best project, but you can tell that the production team behind it and the director didn't just film a Van Damme project for a quick buck. Well, this was my retrospective spanning from the 80s to nowadays. In today's day and age, it seems like Van Damme is trying to get a couple of movies produced through his production company Rodin, along with his sons and daughter. I'm still dreaming to see Van Damme on the big screen as part of a nationwide release. I definitely think it's still possible in ensemble cast movies such as the Expendables series, where enough manpower will give big box office returns. But the days of small martial art films being widespread releases, it's getting more and more difficult. Big budget popcorn films with heavy CGI are the kings of cinema nowadays. Even though times have changed, I'll still be there streaming Van Damme films however they are released, and time has proven that projects such as Jean-Claude Van Damme, The Expendables, the Belgian movie JCVD, or The Bouncer come along every couple of years, so my hopes are pretty high to be entertained with some more Van Damme in the years to come. please be sure to subscribe and smash the like button. I had a great time revisiting many Van Damme films, and I'll probably figure out a couple more Jean-Claude Van Damme themed videos in future videos. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.